Hi, I want to make a video on how it happens. How it happens. And I've mentioned this briefly in other videos along the way. And the idea is we don't need to know exactly what's happening at all times. We just need to understand how things happen. Obviously, that leaves an open space. It's the catch-22 or whatever it may be, the red herring, the non-starter for many people when it comes to proving God or proving the explanation of the universe. The mystery of the universe is that we can't know exactly how everything is happening in every single moment. We just have to, we have to know every single thing for us to understand the universe. In reality, the only mystery that we're going to be living in is the mystery of what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I wonder what I'm going to eat. I can think of what I'm going to eat tomorrow. I can think of how long I'm going to sleep. How long am I going to sleep tonight? How long am I going to do this? What's going to happen here? We can understand that there's going to be another day. The Earth revolves around the sun. The moon revolves around the Earth. And we can understand to a certain extent that that's how things work, unless things change, and we can understand why and how things change. We don't need to know exactly every single circumstance, photon, atom bumping this, that, and the other thing, every single XYZ, this, that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 9, 9, pi. We don't need to know every number to pi and pi to understand exactly what's going on. We need to know how, why, who, what, when, where, why. We don't need to know everything. How is it happening? And that's really all we need to know. We don't need to know the when of everything. We don't need to know the why of everything. We don't need to know the how of everything. We just need to know how the general function of something is existing. And that's the only responsibility or obligation we have to the truth. And the truth is we can only know so much, and they only know so much, and doesn't mean we can't know how everything's working. We can just know everything's working a certain way. And we can't know how everything's moving or interacting in the environment all at once, and it's only in one moment in time, and I can't know how it's happening every moment in time. No. I can't explain every atom, but then again, that goes back to the idea that life explains itself. It doesn't need you to understand it for it to happen. Life is explaining itself. It doesn't matter if you heard the tree falling in the forest. It doesn't matter if you saw the coyote eating the deer. It doesn't matter if you saw this or you saw that. The fact is that the function's existing in reality regardless, and it's about us discovering it. And our discovery can only be explained so much with the who, what, when, where, why, the questions and the explanations you can have for those answers. And like I've mentioned before, is the words we use can only describe the circumstance so much, and the circumstance doesn't need our explanation or our perception or our interaction for it to exist itself. So, the only obligation we have is the how it functions. How much is it functioning? What's really going on here? Ask those, who, what, when, where, why, how. Ask those 6 questions, answer them as best as you can. Understand, keep it open to the possibility of a better answer or more described answer. But generally speaking, once you know generally how something works, like evolution or something like that, something that's already happened, you can know to a certain extent that that's how it happened. That's what happened. You don't need to describe every single animal that was eaten, the cause, or every single animal that died, how it died, this, and how many blood drops per square inch ounce of body fat came out of them as the coyote chewed their head off or whatever it was. You don't need to know all the specific circumstances. You just need to know how the function worked itself. In and of itself, how did it function innately? How did it function? You need to know the function. You don't need to know every single atom moving or bumping. You just need to know the function. And even then, it doesn't need the atom, whatever distinction or contrivance you want to make. Reality exists and it's moving. So like I'm interacting, my interaction is inside the environment, like I've mentioned so many times before. The only difference is I'm just in interaction in the environment, and I'm making a change right now, but it's still inside the environment. Me interacting like this doesn't change the facts of reality, and it doesn't need this for this to still be happening. It doesn't need this for something to happen outside of me moving my hand like this. It doesn't need this thing moving for something else to be happening, regardless of this thing existing or reacting or causing words or describing something. It's still going to exist regardless. It's just now I'm interacting, and that's part of the reality, and that's part of the reality now. But later on, it may or may not be part of the reality, and it doesn't change the fact that there's going to be a different reality then, there, here, where, later on. It doesn't matter. Something's going to change. And it doesn't need this for it to exist. So, really simple ideas. How it happens. I mean, know how. Especially if it's a function that already happened. And it's still happening. We can base it off of just previous knowledge. How does evolution work? We can generalize generally understand how evolution is working because we understand the function. And it's about understanding the function more than the friction, or it's about understanding the function more than, say, understanding every single circumstance. It's existing everywhere at all times. Because that in and of itself is a contrivance. Not only a contrivance in and of itself intellectually or perceptually, it's a contrivance to find an excuse to make it seem like there's some kind of mystery to existence. When in reality, the only way you're considering or even thinking about describing reality piece by piece, atom per atom, that doesn't even exist because it exists in and of itself. It doesn't need your interaction to exist, and there's no way to have that interaction except for you being part of that interaction that's existing everywhere. So on, in every interaction that's existing here, there, everywhere, up, down, left, right, north, south, east, west. It's an interaction that exists here. It doesn't need this explanation to describe it. The mutual understanding where it makes it relevant is how a function works, and we can know that and mutually describe it based on a language in which we understand. And it comes down to language at that point, really. I mean, it comes down to this idea of regression of reason, too, or regression of understanding certain things. Well, how does this happen? Then how does this happen? Then how does this happen? And why, if that happens, you know, like a kid asking why, who, what, when, where, why, who, what, when, where, why, who, what, when, where, I, yes. You can only do so much to change, or not really change, but you can only do so much to ask. You can only answer so much, and you can keep on changing slight variables in the sentence just to make it seem like you keep answering it in a circle, but you've already got the answer, and just because you keep answering it this way and you keep on going on, doesn't mean you're describing the exact function of existence, because you've already probably explained it 20 times, even just asking the same question 20 times. You don't need to, what's your name? Okay, your name's this, then why, then why, then why, then why. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? You've already explained the function, general function, probably in the first question you answered. And you're answering a different question once you've already, the question's changed. And why does this happen? Well, you've already explained why this happened, now you're going to explain why this happens. So you've already answered the question, the first question, with your first answer. You answered that, then they ask you why again, and you answer a different question. And then eventually you'll realize you can change it however you want, but it doesn't change the fact that not only do these words only do so much to describe the environment, they don't need you to begin with. The environment doesn't need your explanation, but you can only do so much to describe a certain circumstance, and it doesn't mean much beyond that, and you probably answer the question over and over again at that point anyway. And it's all about this regression, and this regression is just another contrivance that exists as a function but doesn't exist as an explanation. Our words, our descriptions exist as a function more than an explanation. I think reality describes itself, and the reality is the only explanation for reality, and our description doesn't mean much of jack shit. Obviously, these things living into it make something of it, but the only real description of reality is something that reality creates itself. And since our function of speaking is part of reality, that's the only way it really has any meaning, is by proxy or by way of reality. Then our existence, does that mean something of an explanation? But inside the reality, that explanation means nothing, a distinction from reality, and making that distinction and speaking about what's actually going on. So it doesn't mean much of anything. And I mean, another thing I want to touch on is, going off the cuff like this. I like going off the cuff in these things because sometimes you never really know where you're going, and I think that's a good way of coming to some conclusions and realizing some things. Even though it's talking about something where words and ideas don't mean much, it still gets the idea across, and it's still, you can understand functionally, because I'm working more with my perception and understanding and using words to describe that perception. And like I said, it can be describing of the reality just as much just because it's part of the reality itself, and I can understand that I'm thinking many of these thoughts, and it's about having these logical thoughts of perception change into words, and the perception means more than the words. So you can have you can be really good at describing something, but if your perception's lacking, if you're describing some very simplistic idea very articulately, good for you, but if there's not something really, there's not much going on here, then you're just making up for it in, colorful language, or colorful words or colorful vocabulary. It doesn't mean much of anything. You're decorating it with something. You're decorating a a leafless tree with what, grass. You're just throwing hay on top of it or something. You're not really letting it grow and flourish on its own. Like going off the cuff, it goes back to the generalized intelligence thing, and that's the point I wanted to make. Is, generally speaking, it's going off the cuff and realizing you can go off the cuff and realize these things and different ideas, and it can make some implications in what exactly or how much exactly you understand. Like I said, it's about portraying the logical sense of perception and portraying that with words, and the words are all I'm doing is to portray a message. And I can understand that I understand these things based off my senses and recognition. Because not only am I a piece of this puzzle, I'm a piece observing the pieces moving around in the puzzle that I'm moving around in as well. But that doesn't mean I still can't observe the pieces and know exactly what's going on. I can only do so much in reaction to what's going on inside the puzzle. So I can still recognize what's going on. I can still recognize its deterministic mechanism. I can still recognize what's going on in reality. I can still recognize some photons and this and that and the other thing moving at the speed of light. Beyond just the simple movement of my hand moving back and forth, I can realize the function is moving at the speed of light and breaking down and refunctioning and building up and so on and so forth. I can understand that's something that's happening. Even though I'm in the function, I can still recognize that it's something that exists in reality, even though I'm part of the reality that's existing that way. I can still understand what's going on. So it's something I can still react to, because the reaction is the idea, and the idea is really important when it comes to these things, obviously. Sorry, I'm tired, so I may be a little incoherent. When you're tired, it's not always the best way to make videos, but I still think it's good to get the videos done rather than not get them done, right? So, yeah. Otherwise, I'd have to wait like a whole week again. Jeez. So, yeah, anyway, I mean, that's really important. So, words are a good function in describing perceptions and ideas, since there's no other way of describing perceptions and ideas. It's the only tool we really have, is language, not vocabulary, not just our voice, but our language. Typing something, writing something, getting an idea across using symbols, and that's important. And that's all we can do to interact based on our own perceptions of recognition of reality and our interactions and our own personal experience. It's about portraying that personal experience as best as we can, as accurately as we can. As long as we have a mutual understanding, I mean, that's as close as we can get. But just because you have a mutual understanding doesn't mean you understand or you're portraying something accurately. Because that's why, the truth is already halfway around the world, and the truth hasn't even put its shoes on yet, or whatever. The lie is already halfway around the world, but the truth hasn't put its shoes on yet, kind of thing. So yeah, reality explains itself. Doesn't need our interaction. Already how it happens. The function means more than knowing exactly what's going on at all moments, because reality explains itself. That goes back to reality explaining itself. It doesn't need to know every single thing happening. We just need to know the function, because reality is already explaining that. We're part of reality, and we can do our best to explain it using vocabulary and language. And that's all. The only obligation we have is the intelligent people, or the intelligent ones, are there to describe the circumstances, and everyone else describe it using vocabulary and circumstances to convince, and not only convince, but to persuade people to believe the truth, and not only believe it, but understand it. We don't need to understand everything happening everywhere at all times. Everything, I mean, it's contrivance in and of itself. The reality explains itself, and we only need to know the function. And regression of reasoning, you're going to keep asking why, who, what, when, or why, but obviously that goes back to the problems with language and explanation, and we only need to know so much, and you can keep asking why, but you've already answered why with the answer you gave. Unless you don't answer them, you say, why does Earth go around the sun? Because of its gravitational pull, its gravitational field around the sun. I mean, obviously you give a more descriptive answer, but that's the general truth. You're describing it more generally, but that's the general idea. You can explain here, there, everywhere. You can be a little more specific to the function, but once you explain why, how is every single atom moving? That's a different question in and of itself, because you're in that circumstance, using language, you can cut off and can make little contrivance and close, you can close the question off one at a time, and you can make that question of itself mean something, as opposed to keep on asking why and why and why before you get to the real answer. You describe the answer, You gave the general function, you gave how it happens. Now you're moving on to another question. Well, why does that happen? Well, that's another question. Well, that happens because of this. And how does this happen? And how does that happen? And you can, generally speaking, I think you get the point. I hope that you can close it off, and it can become and you've answered the general question in and of itself. And like I said, beyond that, reality describes itself, and it's about getting our best way of describing it between using language and symbols between living things and having that interaction exist. To understand as best we can and make it become perceptual. It's about convincing them and have the idea flourish and spread in their mind and bloom in their mind. And even if it's not necessarily the most accurate way of description that they go off of, it can bloom the idea perceptually in their mind that's more accurate than the words that convince them that it was true or trick them some tomfoolery into believing it's true. All of a sudden it sets off bloom, and the logic blooms, and therefore reality there becomes the convincer more than, say, something words that you can understand reality more based on your perception more than the words that convince you to think that way to begin with. So yes. Could have explained this better, but I'm tired, and I just want to make sure I don't go on too long in this video. So if anything else, I can always mention this in some other videos. So if I need to mention anything else, that's all I need to say for right now. So I guess thank you, and until next time. And if I have anything else to say on this subject, I'll mention it in another video. So thank you, and goodbye.